So first, a quick introduction. This is a picture of me and my family on Easter Sunday after church during our little celebration at the family farm. My wife grew up in a farm in St. Peter, Minnesota, which is just south of Minneapolis. In fact, my wife and daughter, who are standing next to each other, joined me this week. They're sitting over there at a table. This is my wife's second RCAF convention, and she was very excited to participate. I'm 58 years old. I've been married, and I'm a father of 3. We live in a place called Oneida, New York. Has anyone out there ever heard of the brand of flatware Oneida? That's where it came from. In fact, that's the factory that Matt and I ended up buying, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. I have a degree in international business and marketing, and have had some interesting experiences in my life. When I was in high school, about halfway through, my family moved down to Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I graduated high school down there with a bunch of Brazilians and international students, as well as Americans who were expats along with me. And then as part of the sort of international business career, ended up going down to Mexico with a steel distribution company to sell American steel into the Mexican market. As NAFTA was cranking up, it was my Gilligan's Island experience. It was supposed to be a 2-year tour, and it ended up lasting 13 years. So at the end of that tour, I was working for Oneida Limited. They had a factory down there that was founded the year that I was born, 1963. And they decided, because of pressure from China in the marketplace, that they were going to shut down all their factories worldwide and try and save the factory in Sherrill, New York, which the office building was built when Abraham Lincoln was president, just to sort of put it in perspective. And that didn't work out for them. They struggled for a year. They spent millions of dollars trying to automate, and they decided to close it down. So Matt Roberts and I, who were friends, decided that we'd take a chance and buy that factory, and that's when we started Sherrill Manufacturing. We knew that Made in America was important to people, and we were hopeful that one day it would make a comeback. International trade, as a result of watching what happened in the flatware industry and also in Mexico, due to the Chinese basic takeover of manufacturing, has become a passion of mine. And I joined a group called CPA. Love the organization. It's a nonpartisan organization that just fights for things that are real. That's how I met Michael Stumo, Zach, and of course Bill, who has been an integral part of that organization for quite a while. And they gave me the honor of becoming co-chair, along with Jim Stuber, of the Buy American Committee. How many cow jokes can you hear in a 2 or 3 day period? So I didn't have any good ones, and if I did come up with one, it would probably be something that you'd heard 1,000 times. So I came up with the cow on a clothesline. So maybe that'll give you some. It's not on there. Oh, there it was. That's a cow on a clothesline. So hopefully that'll give you some inspiration for some decorating this fall. So again, the company that I work for is named Sherrill Manufacturing. Believe it or not, due to competition, we are the only flatware manufacturers left in the United States. Our brand is Liberty Tabletop. Why not Liberty Flatware? I'll get into that right now. So we had a vision. Our vision was that Made in America was important. And even though the trend really didn't tell you that, there were maybe 5% of people in the United States that really pursued and insisted on Made in America, it was a big opportunity for us if we could ever turn that around. Recently, and I'll get into a little bit about what happened to us during our COVID experience, we have expanded the website to include all sorts of items that you might need for your kitchen, tabletop, and patio. We even have a can opener that's still made in the United States, and it's not like some of those cheesy can openers you might get at the grocery store. It actually works. So March 22nd, 2020 was a defining moment for a lot of us. This town that I live in, even though it's basically in the Adirondacks in the wilderness, it's an agricultural community, is only 258 miles from Manhattan, which was the epicenter of this thing. So we got instructions from the governor to shut our businesses down and go home. So we picked up our computers, we sent all of our manufacturing employees home, and we set up shop in what we called our bunker. I'm sure a lot of people called it that, and set out to figure out what we were going to do next. Well, they started coming out with this thing called guidance from the New York government. The governor would get on there every day and tell us what we needed to do. I think he was pretty much making it up as he was going along. That became evident. But one of the first things they did within the first week was said, okay, anybody who's a government contractor or government supplier can remain in business. Seemed a little self-serving, but we used that as our excuse to call everybody back. Those employees, like my folks in the marketing group, could stay at home and work from home, but you can't make forks and spoons and knives from your house. So we had about 70% of our employees come back that first week to fulfill orders for our military contract, which is an important part of our business. Then about a week later, they came to their senses and they said that, okay, warehousing, fulfillment, and distribution companies, which we were through our internet company, could also remain in business. So our website, our government business, which was 90% of our revenue, was back up and running within about a week. So we basically lifted ourselves out of this very frightening moment and found a path forward. Something magical happened. There was a huge wave of patriotic purchasing, and it started with masks. I don't know if you remember back when this first started, but nobody had really even heard of a mask, much less where to get one. There was a lot of publicity about all the masks coming from China and some of the N95s being fake N95s, and they really didn't work, and they were hard to find. Bizarre things happened, like I think everybody can probably remember that we ran out of toilet paper for some reason. But there was a big wave of patriotic purchasing, and at the time, a lot of people were calling it the China virus, including our president. So the Made in America brand that we had so coveted for many years among our small group became gold, and the Made in China brand became toxic. We noticed there's this thing called Google Trends where you can go onto the internet and see how many people are searching for something relative to how many people were searching for that over a period of time. This chart dates all the way back to 2014, and you can see the tail end of it, it just went straight up. Those were the searches for anything on the internet that contained the phrase Made in USA. It's pretty stunning. What we found out was that half of that was people actually looking for masks made in the USA. It's tailed off to about half of what it was at its peak, but it still remains at levels that are much higher than they were going into the pandemic. The other thing that happened to our particular business was restaurants and stores closed down. Some of the restaurants were open for carryout, but it was a fraction of what was being spent at restaurants when they were open for dine-in. And of course, with the stores being closed down, the online sales went through the roof. Families began cooking and eating together at home, and they wanted something nice to put on their table. And maybe they didn't have enough flatware, maybe it didn't match, or maybe they needed some new cookware. So our company basically was handling all that. And it was made in America. So as an online retailer and a seller of Made in America products focused on the tabletop, kitchen, and patio, our sales doubled almost immediately, and they've continued strong. So this kind of leads through our experience and what we went through as a company in this ordeal. But our biggest issue wasn't any longer how to find new customers and keep growing. It was how to keep up with this rapid increase in production demand, a doubling in the factory. And more than a year later, our biggest issue remains how do we keep up with our production demands, which continue to grow. We're up 40% over the doubling that happened when we first started this whole COVID experience, which tells you that Made in America is still as strong as it was among the American consumer, And that continues to grow. So on the way out here, it was interesting because we drove from Minnesota all the way through the Dakotas, and we're driving through cities and little towns and manufacturing facilities, restaurants, retail stores. Just about every place you go has a help wanted sign on it. And it's absolutely incredible. We drove by one place where they were offering a $2,000 bonus to sign on for a job at a factory. Wages have gone way up. Our wages are up 40% in the last 4 years as we try and attract people, but also do the right thing. As we became larger and a more profitable company, we want to share that with our employees so we can get back to a livable wage in the manufacturing setting. So why is this happening? Well, the first thing that happened, I knew you'd get a kick out of that picture of that kid on the couch. First thing that happened is our government began instituting policies that are literally designed to put people on the couch. It started out at $600 a week. Now it's down in most places to $300 a week. Some states have completely done away with it. They extended unemployment benefits, which used to expire after a certain amount of months, made them basically indefinite. We called up the Department of Labor in the state of New York, and they basically said that their qualification rules for unemployment, all you have to do is tell them you're scared of COVID, and they'll just write you a check. So the eviction ban, a lot of people don't think about this, but one of the reasons people find a job is because they have to pay their rent. Well, they know they can't be evicted. That just got extended, so why get a job? Sit on the... Oh, these things disappear. I apologize. So there we go. And then the student loan repayment program was halted. So this has kept a lot of our young people out of the job market because they don't have student loans that they have to pay back. A lot of people anticipate, you'd sort of jump on the bandwagon, and these type things sort of make you angry, and you think, okay, is it going to go away when these particular items go away? And I don't think it will. I think it's going to expose what is the root of the problem for our company and many other companies in manufacturing across the United States. This is a really eye-opening chart. You'll see that back in the 2008, 2010 timeframe during the Great Recession, there were certainly more unemployed people than there were jobs. That gap closed and actually went inverse during the last couple of years of the Trump administration. COVID hit, everybody went to the bunker, and unemployment shot through the roof. That has fallen dramatically, and once again, there are, I believe, 1.3 million more job openings available in the United States than there are people on the unemployment rolls to fill those jobs. And if you think about it, not everybody that's on the unemployment rolls is going to find a job. So we have a huge gap in between the amount of people that we need to fill these positions and the amount of people that are available. This is another thing that has popped up. It's U.S. population growth as an economic driver grinds to a halt. In fact, the Federal Reserve basically came out in this article, if you read through it, and said that this is a threat to our economic viability. If our growth in people shrinks below a certain level, you look at this chart, I think it's still up there, and if you look at it, this goes all the way back to 1930. It peaked in the 50s and 60s during our major economic expansion. It's now down to around 1%. You simply cannot sustain an economy with growth that low in your population. I talked to Bill and Candace a little bit before this trade show to see if there was any impact of this in the cattle industry. And basically what they told me is, well, business is down so low, we're all having to basically take second jobs to help put food on the table and get through some hard times. But I thought where it may be impacting, and what you may be seeing, and maybe one of the drivers of the higher prices at the supermarket, is at the packer level. When we drove through Sioux Falls, I'm not sure exactly what type of facility it is. There was a Smithfield facility there. They had hiring signs everywhere. That is probably driving up the cost of their labor and creating problems for them producing product, which in a roundabout way is affecting you all because that's going to drive more and more production overseas and bringing this prepackaged stuff in direct competition with you guys. So it's something to keep an eye on because a lot of these issues that we're facing in manufacturing, and it's kind of a theme that's crossed with a lot of speakers, they show up in manufacturing, they show up in farming, they show up in retail, they show up in many areas of our economy. So if we're going to have this renaissance in manufacturing, if we're going to make American-made toasters again, and American-made cars, and American-made flatware again, where are all the workers going to come from if our population is dwindling and we don't have enough people on the unemployment rolls to fill the existing jobs that we have today? Well, the first thing that'll usually pop out of somebody's mouth that has never owned a manufacturing company or perhaps never run a ranch is, well, let's just automate. We'll just get a bunch of robots. We'll have one guy standing there. We can pay him a bunch of money, and he'll just make everything, and it'll just pop out like popcorn. Well, I can tell you right now, that's part of the solution, but it's certainly not a big part of the solution for an industry like ours. I'm sure, are there drones that you guys use to try and help with labor? I'm sure that their technology plays a part in ranching, and we're going to take a look at some augmented robotics and updating of the technology and the automation that we have in our factory, but we're still going to need an awful lot of people if we want to expand our business. So here's the part where the conversation becomes really interesting. How many people here can trace back your ancestors to Ellis Island and the waves of immigration that came over from Europe? This is really, when you travel outside of the United States, the Statue of Liberty and the whole Ellis Island thing is an integral part of how the rest of the world views America. It's a matter of pride for Americans. It's a matter of people in foreign lands looking to us as a beacon of light, I believe is what they call it. Has anybody here ever been to the museum at Ellis Island? One of my favorite museums, if not my favorite museum to go to, because what it talks about is over a span of time, there were pockets of places in the world where folks came from, be it the potato famine in Ireland or the Cossacks in Russia that got ran off because of religious or political persecution. Different stories, and it told the stories of what these people were going through where they lived and why they were willing to get on a boat and eat garlic soup for a week and maybe or maybe not make it to this foreign land that they really knew nothing about. They were pretty desperate. And the other thing that you find out about Ellis Island is the biggest problem that they had was when the immigrants that they wanted to come over came over, a lot of times they were in ill health. They were sick, they had tuberculosis, they had some sort of a disease, and they didn't want to let all that disease into the country, so a lot of those buildings that you see there are actually infirmaries. And between working with the steamship lines to pre-screen people and working with the doctors to cure people, they were able to get over 98% of the people that showed up on a boat into the country safely and immigrated. And here's a picture of that processing center back in who knows when this was, with hundreds of people sitting in a room waiting to be documented and sent through the process. Well, here's another issue that's in the paper along with COVID and Afghanistan and everything else that you'll see when you turn on the TV set. We have this massive wave of illegal immigration going on right now. And my political thought process is probably very similar to most of the people out here in the audience. I had the pleasure of being here a couple years ago talking to folks. I think I know where we're all coming from. I don't know of anyone that really thinks that our immigration situation right now down on the border is good. In fact, it's broken. The whole system is a mess. take a guess how many people they legally let into the country to fill these millions of jobs that are available that we can't fill with our own folks. 33,000 a year. That isn't going to make a dent in anything. It's sort of like that rainfall we got yesterday. It was welcomed here because of the drought, but that's not going to solve the problem. We need a lot more than that to fix our issues. So we have millions of undocumented aliens as a part of this broken process that are living all over the United States in what I'll call a shadow economy. It's doing them no favors. Our factories are starved for workers. Just drive down the street, you see those signs, and our economy is threatened because of this slow population growth that I was talking about. So right now, there are millions of people living in poverty. You read the stories about a lot of them down in Latin America. It's religious, it's political, it's corruption, it's economic turmoil in a lot of these countries, and they're willing to risk everything. Read some of the stories if you have a chance about what they endure on their journey to try and get here for a chance of perhaps making it across. And the only ones who are benefiting from this are the drug cartels, who have taken over the human smuggling operations, and they're exploiting and robbing and mistreating the people that are trying to come here and creating this mass confusion that we now have at our borders. So my thought, and the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because it's not something that you're going to read in the newspaper yet or hear about when you turn on the television yet, is in order to solve a lot of these problems which we have in our economy, perhaps it's time to remove the word museum from that legendary American landmark called Ellis Island and come up with what I called Ellis Island 2.0. I'm kind of a website guy, so I sort of came up with that. And we could end the misery for millions of these people that are seeking a better life. We could shut down the drug cartels and the human trafficking nightmare that exists. We could create a system of vetting the refugees to make sure that we keep the bad actors out. And we could provide the human capital necessary to revitalize the American manufacturing sector of the economy and bring our jobs back from China. Because I can tell you right now that politically, I think across the spectrum, there's a lot of wanting and a lot of willingness to bring back jobs from China. We went through the pandemic experience of no masks, no ventilators. We've recognized that we have a problem, but if you don't have people to fill those jobs and to build those factories, you're not going to be able to accomplish that. So a lot of people would argue and say, you know, well, we need to hire Americans for these jobs before we allow immigrants to come in for these jobs. Well, that's true, but in a lot of cases, and I can tell you this firsthand, we put up our help wanted signs, and there's certainly a bunch of unemployed folks out there. These are not the type of jobs that they're looking for. But what happens, interestingly, in manufacturing is for every job you create on the floor, you create 4 to 7 non-factory jobs outside of that. Some of those are inside the business. They could be accountants, they could be engineers, they could be construction folks to build the factories that we need to have built. They could be in the trades, plumbers, electricians. We've heard a lot about how we need more tradesmen. They could be in education as our population expands. How many of you folks have seen elementary schools and public schools shutting down? I know in our community, every year it seems like we have a school that shuts down and gets consolidated. Wouldn't it be nice to turn that around? My 2 daughters are going to be in the education field, and I'd love nothing more than for them to have better opportunities. Lawyers, and I'm not talking about the ambulance chasers, I'm talking about people like the fellow that's helping out our CAF with their legal struggles, and people, I'm sorry? Layers? Oh, layers, okay, well, spelling was never my thing, and my wife was supposed to edit that. Doctors, and here's the important thing. Even the pizza guy across the street benefits from this. And what am I talking about? The factory that we run right now employs 75 people. When Oneida ran that factory, and it was the biggest factory in the world, there were 2,300 employees on site. So imagine the impact that that had on the community with people going to for lunch, grab a slice of pizza. They'd go to the other restaurant. They'd go to the bar after work. They'd go down to the men's clothing store and buy clothing. All those stores have shut down. So bringing back this manufacturing economy to the United States from China will help bolster all sectors of the economy. So at the end, it's very simple. There can be no renaissance in American manufacturing unless we address the people problem. And kind of a theme that we've been running, and the theme of this talk today is, we're different people, we have different issues, but one issue that unifies us all, in this room at least, is that bad trade policies have affected us all in a very negative way. And this is kind of what I wanted to get into now, and I'll check my time here. Supporting organizations that focus on trade issues and represent us in Washington. Bill and the rest of RCAF have done just an absolutely tremendous job of lobbying and working with our representatives in DC to help correct some of the things that have gone wrong and right the ship in terms of the cattle industry. Bill's also a member of CPA who broadens that issue. But what I'm going to encourage everybody here to do in a couple different ways is, in business, we talk about it in terms of silos. We're the salespeople, we're the accountants, we're the shop guys, okay? There's a lot of people with common interests here that are operating within their silo. And one of the reasons I think Bill wanted me to speak, and he wanted Mike Dolan to speak from labor and business perspectives, is to broaden this conversation and hopefully form alliances and partnerships where we can work together in support of each other on things that maybe don't affect the ranching silo specifically, but they affect the broader issue and they can turn the country around. And when we turn the country around, that's what we need to do. NCTO, that's the clothing guys, okay? Back in 1980, 80% of the clothing that you had on your back came from the United States. Now it's less than 3%. Guess where it went? China, Bangladesh, and India. Bad trade policies. Who got thrown out of work? Millions of workers got thrown out of work. And here we are wearing Chinese shirts. This has got to come to an end. It has to be fixed. The Alliance for American Manufacturing, that's the steel guys. The US produces half the amount of steel they used to produce, and China has taken over that business. Why did Oneida Limited get out of the flatware making business in Sherrill, New York? And it's very simple. It's very similar to what you guys have been talking about in the cattle industry. They were the producers, they were the factory, and here's the math. You go into the department store and you buy a box of flatware for $100. Macy's, the packers at retail, were making $70 off that, leaving $30 for Oneida, the brand, to sell it. They made a profit, 50%, so it went down to $15. By the time it got here from China, that was $5, it was $10. That was what we were getting for our box of flatware to be apples to apples at the producer level. And in the marketplace, we saw it selling for $100. How frustrating is that? Does that sound a little familiar? Okay, so what we did in our company is we said, the heck with this, and I understand there are problems with regulations and scale. We simply went around the packers, and we started selling direct into retail at $100. And because it's made in America, sometimes we can command a little bit of a premium based on the better quality that we're offering in the marketplace. And again, our business is growing. People are starting to recognize this. I don't understand the math in the beef industry, but when I look at those charts and I see the numbers and I go to the grocery store and I'm paying $14 a pound for a good ribeye steak, the light bulbs start going off, and I start thinking, And I know that there are crowd cow and there are different organizations, there's scaling problems, there's regulations, but I would just encourage everybody that can do that to give that some serious thought. MadeInAmerica.com, another organization, more of a grassroots type thing. They were going to put on a trade show, try and bring American manufacturers and their suppliers together. They had their first one in Indianapolis. It was a great success. Unfortunately, Louisville got canceled this year. There are individuals out there that have written books, and I'll make this presentation available to people who might want to follow up on this. One of them is a woman that I met a year and a half before the pandemic. Her name is Rosemary Gibson. She wrote a book called China RX. Do you realize that China has taken over the prescription drug industry to the extent that our hospitals would be shut down in 6 weeks if they cut off our supply? Do you know how scary that is? We don't have a producer of penicillin left in the United States. So imagine during the pandemic, she became the hot ticket in Washington, D.C. She sat down and testified before Congress. Of course, she was a conspiracy theorist before this all started. Now they're taking her seriously. A couple weeks ago, she testified before the Joint Chiefs of Staff to try and get the military to start supporting domestic manufacturers of drugs as a catalyst to bring this industry back home where it belongs. Jim Stuber, good friend of mine and my co-chair on the CPA Buy American Committee, wrote a book, What If Things Were Made in America Again? And that book is available on our website. We don't make any money off of it. We're trying to get the word out. Excellent read. He goes all the way back to British mercantilism. It's an easy read. There's 2 chapters that get a lot of numbers in them. But other than that, his conclusion is something that brings me back to, I forget which person it was that put that martini glass up there, with the consumers being the biggest group at the top and the producers being the base at the bottom, and then there's that little thin bottleneck, and that's what they were focusing on trying to kill. Jim's conclusion to this is that if we work together and we insist on buying American-made products, and we make an effort at that the American consumer, not the politician, is actually who has the power in their pocketbook. And then I forgot, there are other individuals like my friend Harry Mosier at the Reshoring Institute, who works with companies that have reshored to go through the correct math, not the political math, but the correct math to understand what is the real cost of offshoring and bringing in your computer chips for your automobiles from China. What happens if you don't have any of those? Has anybody looked at a car lot lately? You can hardly find a car on there, and it's all back to the computer chips and the supply chain that we've lost, the ability to control our own destiny. So how do we go about doing this? And I know we're coming up on time here. I'm going to try and wrap this up, but where's the beef from? The packers and the powers that be are trying to hide the ball on where the meat is actually coming from. The same thing happens on the web. We're fighting our own cool online fight, because if you go into a store and you flip over the box, by law, it has to say the country of origin of every product that you purchase. If it doesn't, they're in violation of the law. On the internet, it does not. In fact, there are companies out there using AI that when you type in toaster made in the USA, all of a sudden a website pops up. 10 best toasters made in the USA. And it takes you to a page that the title of it is Best Toasters Made in the USA. And then a bunch of links where you can click off, and you go to places like Amazon and the Cuisinart website. Of course, there is no toaster made in the USA. All they're doing is tricking you by taking what you're looking for and making it seem like you're finding a made in USA product, and you're not going to know until it shows up at your door and you look on the back of the box and it says made in China. There are companies like Buy Direct USA, Made in USA Forever, Made in America store out in Buffalo and online, USA Loved List, and I'll get my shameless plug in for our own company, that are working to vet products and only sell things that are actually made in the USA and take that trickery away. It's difficult because a lot of times there simply isn't what you want to put in your department store available. We can't find a blender that's 100% made in the USA. It's hard to find cookware that's 100% made in the USA. But we've gone out there and we're fighting the fight, and where some of these are more broad-based sites, we're trying to fill that space of the kitchen, tabletop, and patio and do a really good job of having a store where you can go in with 100% confidence online and buy actual American-made products. As part of the China bill, you may have heard about that, passed in the Senate a couple months ago. There is a Cool Online Act. It was a major victory for us, much as the Beef Cool Act was for RCAF. If that makes it through the rest of Congress and comes through and is signed into law, within a year, everything that you see on the internet will have to have country of origin on it. So 10 years ago, maybe even before that, I kind of felt probably like a lot of you did when the Packers first started taking over the process and a lot of these scary things started happening in ranching, that I was just one lonely voice howling in the wind. I would hear things like, Greg, why did you buy a flatware factory? You know, just give it up. Everything's moving to China. You're living in the past. Time to move on. Well, things have changed, and the mood in our country has changed. Certainly the mood in Washington has changed, as Bill and others that have spent many years going down there will tell you. People used to look at us like we were from Mars. Now we're well received, and we're showing up in groups of ranchers and labor and manufacturing, all singing the same tune, and it's being very well received. The American consumer has woken up, particularly as a result of some of the challenges that we faced during COVID. So now more than ever, it's time for organizations like us to join forces and support each other, and we can do that by buying American beef. We can do that by trying to buy American blue jeans. I know there's somebody out there selling American blue jeans. Everything that we do, let's focus on helping each other through this issue, through these hard times, and changing the direction of our country.